In the book of Daniel, Daniel prophesies that the church age will end with a war. That's in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26b. And the end thereof, it says, shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Now, when he says flood, Daniel wasn't talking about a flood of water, of course, but a flood of men, a vast army. And Ezekiel tells us that that army, or those people, are named ahead of time who they're going to be that are attacking. In Ezekiel 38, chapter 2, chapter 38, verse 2, starts off, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. And say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now, Gog is the ruler of Russia. And it goes on to say, And I will turn thee back, put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Now, of course, this is God speaking through Ezekiel, telling the leader of Russia that he's going to cause him to believe he has to go to war under some kind of conditions in later years with his entire army and equipment, and that he, God, is going to be against him when he does. Ezekiel 38:5 names them Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shields and helmets. And of course, these countries in today's language is Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya. Now, Ezekiel 38:6 says, Gomer and his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Now this is Germany and Turkey, and their armies, he says. Next verse, 38:7, says, Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Be aligned with these countries, he's saying, and be ready to lead them. Next verse, 38:8, says, After many days there shall be visited in the latter years, then thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people against the mountain of Israel, without which have been always waste, but it is brought out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. And of course, that's saying Israel was desolate, wasteland for a couple thousand years. Now that Israel is back among them, it is fruitful and growing, and they can export produce. Of course, Israel was brought back to the land in 1948. They became a sovereign nation in actually just one day, and restored the land, as I said, to its productive place. Now, Ezekiel 38:9 says, Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, that's the flood. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Now this is, of course, what Daniel described, as I read in Daniel 26b. And he goes on to say that there will be a great destruction, Daniel does, caused by this army until that war is over. Ezekiel 38:10 says, Thus saith the Lord God, It shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. Now, whatever the reason that Russia thinks they went to war in the beginning, another, now it says, thought will come to them during that time, and they will attack Israel. That's in 38:11. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of the unwalled villages, which is Israel, of course. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates. In other words, Israel is a defenseless little nation, and so with all the armies that's amassed that we just read about, they figured it'd be very easy to overrun Israel. Ezekiel 38:12 says, and the thought in their mind is to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people who are gathered out of the nations, of course that's the Jews, which have gotten cattle and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. So, in other words, whatever mission that Russia and their allies had, had in the beginning, when that was accomplished, that evil thought was that they needed to go into Israel and pillage and take spoil of everything that they had there. Now, they do that. Ezekiel 38:13 says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, Art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey? To carry silver and gold? To take away cattle and goods? To take a great spoil? In other words, the rest of the world, including us, the United States, will have stood by and done absolutely nothing while Israel is being attacked to help them. Now, even now, at this time of the prophecy, while they're being robbed of their goods and overrun and women raped and people taken captive, while all that's going on, the rest of the world takes no action. They simply negotiate. Does that sound familiar? Ezekiel 38:18 and 19 says, And it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog, remember that's the ruler of Russia, shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. So God has finally had enough now. And now he's taking matters into his own hand, because no nation on earth will come to the aid of the Jews in Israel and help them. So, and the first thing God says he's going to do is cause a great earthquake. Ezekiel 38:20 says, so this earthquake is going to be so large, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of heaven and the beasts of the field and all the creeping things that creep upon the face of the earth shall shake. At my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. That's going to be one large earthquake, as bigger than anyone has ever seen before, I believe. And then God gets serious. Ezekiel 38:21 says, And I will call for a sword against him, this is the ruler of Russia, throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. So, since no one helped Israel, and God is doing this by himself, he turns the armies of those countries that's with Russia and Russia against one another. Whatever way he does that, we don't know. But he says their swords, they will start killing one another in the battlefield there in Israel. And Ezekiel 38:22 says, And I will plead against him with pestilence. Not only the earthquake and all these other, the people turned against one another, now he's going to have, excuse me, pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands and upon many people that are with him, rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. It said that those hailstones could be upwards of 100 pounds, as it's written. Now, this same war is also talked about in Zechariah. And in Zechariah, chapter 14, verses 2 and 3, it shows in more detail the carnage that is going to be done. Zechariah 14:2 says, "For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half the city shall go into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the days of battle. Jerusalem is half taken," it says, when the Lord finally does step in. And here's what it's going to look like in Zechariah 14:12 and 13. It says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord shall smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away as in their holes, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouths. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor." So Zechariah as well as Ezekiel both say that the Lord is going to turn the armies against one another to combat them in that way. They will start killing one another. Now, not only is this going to happen on the battlefield, it also says destruction is going to be sent to their homelands as well. We find that in Ezekiel 39:6. It says, "And I will send a fire on Magog," Magog being the country, Russia, "and many, and among them that dwell curiously in the isles," that's the homelands of those other countries, "and they shall know that I am the Lord." So the destruction will not only be to the armies that's in the field, but to the civilians that's in the homelands of those 5 countries as well. And then after it's over, Ezekiel 39:9 says, "And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn their weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows, the hand staves and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years." Now, of course, he's denoting weapons that was familiar to Ezekiel back at the time, but of course, the modern warfare, Zechariah says that human flesh and animal flesh is what's going to be destroyed. So all the articles of war will be left in the field, and it says there'll be enough of that it'll take 7 years to get rid of. Now, that brings me to believe that the 7 years that are talked about that's going to be left is going to be the tribulation period, because back in Daniel, the next thing that happens after this war there in 9:26b is the reign of the Antichrist. And that's in, of course, Daniel 9, verse 27. "And he," and of course he's the Antichrist, "shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week," and this is a week of years, that's a 7-year period. "And in the midst of that week, or this 3.5 years, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate." Now, this is talking about the Antichrist making a peace agreement for 7 years with the world, and then breaking that agreement 3.5 years into it, by desecrating the temple and having the world worship him instead of allowing the world to worship who they were. Now, Revelation 13:3 says, "And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Now, the beast, of course, is this Antichrist. "And they worshiped the dragon being Satan, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth," or a platform, "speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given him to continue 42 months." Of course, that's the last 3.5 years of that 7-year period. Now, my deduction is that the war in Ezekiel, which will end the church age, as Daniel says, either at its start or at its end or sometime in the middle, will be the next prophecy to come true, except for the rapture. The rapture is, and that war are the next two things to happen. And we, the church, may or may not see the war begin. And if we do, we may not see it end. We just don't know the exact timing right there, but it's all melded together. And in that time, we do know that there, as we just read, be so much turmoil going on that the church, if it were raptured during that time, it would probably go completely unnoticed almost. Now, I believe that war is ready to be started. Remember, God says he will put a hook into Russia's jaw. And in other words, he's going to cause them to attack with those other countries someone for some reason. And when that attack is over, they're going to continue on into Israel and attack them and overrun them, as we just read. So we know what's going to happen there. So it will happen, I believe, very soon. The stage is being set even as we speak. Those countries are aligning themselves together even now, and they're at war all over the globe. So we'll just have to see what that progresses into. The only question left is what will come first, the rapture or the war. They're both on the scene and ready. So be ready. Thank you.